What is an elf? Is it a mischievous sprite of the forest, a noble warrior of ancient lineage, or a wise and ethereal being dwelling in hidden realms? And the answer is all of the above. From the pointed ears to their often magical abilities, the modern elf is a complex figure with a rich and varied history. The modern elf is a fascinating amalgamation of various cultural and mythological influences, drawing from diverse traditions to create the iconic figure we know today. The Álfar of Norse belief are the most direct ancestors of our modern elves, and understanding their characteristics is crucial to tracing the evolution of this mythical figure. The Norse conceived of elves as diverse beings, most notably distinguished by their dwelling place and appearance. The light elves were said to inhabit Álfheimr, one of the 9 realms in Norse cosmology. They are often described as radiant and beautiful, associated with light, beauty, and the natural world. Think of them as the more benevolent side of the elven folk. They were connected to the sun and were sometimes seen as messengers of the gods. And then you have the dark elves, known as Álfar, or sometimes Svartálfar, or black elves. These elves lived in the subterranean realms. They were often depicted as less fair than the light elves, and in some accounts, even hostile. They were associated with darkness, craftsmanship, and the earth itself. It's important to note that the difference between the light elves and dark elves weren't always clear-cut, and some accounts blur the lines between them. Sometimes the dark elves were even confused or conflated with dwarves, who were also skilled craftspeople living underground. A crucial aspect of the Álfar was their deep connection to nature. They were beings of the forest, the hills, the streams, and all the wild places. They were believed to be intimately tied to the cycles of nature, the growth of plants, and the changing of seasons. This association with nature is a thread that runs through almost all subsequent depictions of elves. Furthermore, there's evidence suggesting a possible ancestral connection for some elves. In some Norse beliefs, elves were linked to the spirits of the dead, particularly those who were revered ancestors. This connection to the deceased adds another layer of complexity to their character, suggesting that they weren't simply nature spirits, but might also represent a link to the past. And while Norse mythology provides a rich foundation for the modern elf, it's important to remember that it's not the only source. Other cultural traditions also have contributed to the image we hold today. As the Norse myths spread and interacted with other cultures, the concept of the elf became even richer. Celtic folklore, with its vibrant traditions of fairies and other supernatural beings, significantly contributed to the evolving image of the elf. These Celtic beliefs weren't always a perfect match with the Norse Álfar, but they intertwined and blended, creating a more complex and multifaceted figure. The wee folk, as the Celtics often called their fairies and related creatures, shared many similarities with elves. They were often associated with nature, like the forests and the hills and the wild places. They also possessed magical powers, sometimes benevolent, sometimes mischievous. The idea of the wee folk easily merged with the Norse concept of elves, adding to the growing tapestry of elven characteristics. One particularly significant contribution of Celtic folklore was the emphasis on the more mischievous or trickster-like aspects of some elves. While the Norse had their darker elves, the Celtic traditions brought forth a whole host of fairies and spirits known for their playful pranks, their love of riddles, and their tendency to lead mortals astray. These more capricious and sometimes dangerous qualities became incorporated into the image of the elf, adding a touch of unpredictability and even fear to their mystique. From the forests and hills of Norse tradition, the elf's domain expanded, thanks to Celtic influence, into the realm of fairy itself. This other world, a place of magic and enchantment, became closely associated with elves, further enhancing their otherworldly and ethereal qualities. Beyond the Norse and Celtic traditions, other Germanic folklore also played a role in shaping the elf myth. While the Norse influence is arguably the strongest, it's important to remember that various Germanic tribes shared similar beliefs about supernatural beings. These shared roots contributed to the overall understanding of elves, even if specific details varied from region to region. These diverse Germanic traditions, though distinct, weren't isolated. They interacted and influenced with each other over time, contributing to the gradual evolution of the elf figure. As stories were told and retold, as cultures mingled and exchanged ideas, the image of the elf became a composite of various beliefs and traditions. This constant interplay and evolution is what makes the study of elf origins so fascinating, as it reveals the complex tapestry of human imagination and storytelling. The medieval period witnessed a flourishing of storytelling, and within these tales of chivalry, magic, and adventure, the elf found a prominent place. Medieval romances and literature played a crucial role in shaping the modern image of the elf, adding new dimensions to the figure inherited from Norse and Celtic traditions. These stories often portrayed elves as inhabitants of enchanted forests or hidden realms, possessing magical powers and a connection to the fairy world. They were frequently depicted as beautiful and graceful, sometimes benevolent, sometimes mischievous, but always otherworldly. Characteristics like pointed ears, although they were not universally present in earlier folklore, became more firmly associated with elves during this period. Their connection to nature was further emphasized, often portraying them as guardians of the forests and other wild places. A key figure in medieval elf lore is Oberon, the king of fairies. He appears in various stories and poems, often depicted as a powerful and regal being, ruling over a realm of magic and enchantment. Oberon's influence helps solidify the image of elves as not just individual spirits or nature beings, but as members of a distinct race with their own social structure and hierarchy. He also contributed to the association of elves with courtly life and refined manners, a far cry from the more rustic or wild image of some earlier traditions. Medieval romances also explored the interactions between humans and elves, often depicting encounters in which mortals strayed into the fairy realm or were gifted, possibly tricked, by elven folk. These stories emphasize the magical powers of elves, their ability to shapeshift, and their sometimes ambiguous relationship with humanity. They could be helpful allies or dangerous adversaries depending on the story. This duality further enriched the character of the elf, making them more complex and unpredictable. The medieval period built upon the foundation laid by earlier traditions, adding new layers of sophistication and refinement to the elf myth. They became more than just spirits of nature. They were inhabitants of a magical realm, ruled by powerful monarchs and capable of both great kindness and great mischief. J.R.R. Tolkien's contribution to the modern conception of elves is nothing short of monumental. He didn't invent elves, he just took the existing folklore and refined it, and wove it into the rich tapestry of his Middle-earth mythology, creating the archetype that has dominated fantasy literature and popular culture ever since. Tolkien drew heavily from earlier traditions, particularly Norse mythology. His elves, like the light elves, are radiant, beautiful, and deeply connected to nature. They possess magical abilities, are skilled in crafts, especially metalworking, and have a long lifespan. He retained the idea of elves as ancient and wise, possessing a deep knowledge of the world and its history. They are often portrayed as having a melancholic longing for the past and a sense of detachment from the mortal world. But Tolkien simply didn't copy the old myth. He added his own unique elements, creating a complex and nuanced elven culture. He gave them their own languages, their own history, and their own distinct personalities, such as the High Elves, the Sylvan Elves, and the Sea Elves. This internal diversity further enriched the elven image. Perhaps Tolkien's most significant contribution was the creation of the High Elf archetype. These elves are noble, wise, powerful, and often possess a tragic grandeur. They are keepers of ancient lore, the wielders of great magic, and the guardians of beauty and grace in a world that is often harsh and unforgiving. And this archetype has had a profound impact on how elves are portrayed in subsequent fantasy works. Tolkien's vision of elves spread like wildfire throughout fantasy literature and games. Authors like Ursula K. Le Guin, Terry Pratchett, Bob Salvatore, and many others built upon his foundations, creating their own variations on the elven theme. Dungeons & Dragons, which is, we all know Dungeons & Dragons, incorporated elves as one of its core races, further cementing Tolkien's influence on the popular imagination. From video games to movies to television shows, Tolkien's elves have become a staple of modern fantasy, shaping our understanding of these magical beings. And it's safe to say that without Tolkien, the elves we know and love today would be very, very different. The journey through the mythical origins of elves reveals a fascinating tapestry woven from diverse cultural threads, from the Álfar of Norse mythology with their light and dark aspects and connection to nature, to the mischievous wee folk of Celtic folklore. The elf figure has accumulated layers of meanings and complexity over centuries. Germanic traditions further enrich the myth, while medieval romances and literature elevated elves to inhabitants of magical realms ruled by powerful monarchs and possessing refined qualities. And finally, J.R.R. Tolkien, drawing from these earlier sources, crafted the iconic High Elf archetype that has become the dominant image in modern fantasy. The elf is not a singular creation. It's a composite figure shaped by the beliefs, stories, and imaginations of many cultures. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring human fascination with the supernatural. The elf embodies our longing for connection with nature, our fascination with magic, and our yearning for a world beyond the mundane. But the story of the elf doesn't end there. As our world changes and our understanding of myth evolves, so too will our conception of these magical beings. How will future generations depict elves? Who knows? Will they retain their traditional characteristics, or will they adapt to reflect new anxieties, hopes, and dreams? Archetypes evolve just like humans. Perhaps elves will become symbols of environmentalism, representing our responsibility to protect the natural world. Or maybe they will embody our aspirations for a more harmonious and magical existence. Whatever the future holds, one thing is certain: elves will continue to captivate our imaginations, reminding us of the enduring power of myth and the magic that lies just beyond the veil of our everyday reality.